All right. There we go. Got it. Okay. Well, I think this is working. Yeah, no, this is a stupid computer. Get the camera at the bottom here. To look down here, but we're gonna share the screen for the most part. No, because I'm live streaming it, so I don't need to record it. I might go get the Rode microphone though. I think I'd like to have a better mic so that anybody can hear you guys. You want me to get?
So this happened. Oh, it was just, I know, so it's single. So I put it from there, in order to feel it. To me, that's a procedure.
Someone's a very fine chain and necklace.
I'm not sure if it will acknowledge the existence of this microphone at this point. Default speaker. No, I don't want my default speaker to be that. All right. Well, that should be better for the two people who are watching. Yeah. Connect streaming software is connected. This says we're live. What to believe?
Well, I went to YouTube and it was live.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll go with them. So I don't care about that. All right. So let's. There's just too many programs going at the same time. So we're gonna do a screen share. Share screen. There it is. Share that. Okay. Now that means I want to make this large. All right.
Actually, yeah, saying that it's waiting for new church, just for new church.
Is that right? So it's over here.
Doesn't need to make a check report for our AGMs. People just need
The
to
two
tune in
people
and
waiting.
Yeah, that's what I'm showing.
When I went to it before, it was live.
I mean, Zoom says it's going. View stream on YouTube. Let's try that. All right. Well, no. It's going. I hit play, but it does appear to be working. On top of it. All right. There we go. All right. Well, let's get started. Everything looks like it's working. Go back to this. Yeah, all right. Hey, John.
Hey Todd, how you going?
Good. I'm glad you're there because now I know that you can hear me.
I can.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, your timing's good. We're just getting started. We had some technical difficulties. The screen I used to show everybody here what you're seeing wasn't decided it wasn't going to work today. So,
Oh dear.
yeah. So anyway, so this is an article titled Life and Legends of Virgin Mary, which Jen wrote, as you can see on the date of this, 25 years ago. She was just overwhelmed with falling in love at this time in her life. And so in that state, she was able to write this thing as an homage to her then boyfriend. You know, it was like, this guy really inspired her and to do something big. So this is it.
Yes, who was that?
So the funny thing about this for me is that, you know, she and I were talking about, oh, okay, Christmas class, what do we do? So much of the stuff's been explored, but at this point, you know, what's the topic? Yeah, and she says, well, hey, can you put this article in the newsletter about the Women's Weekend and this part of what's going to be talked about? And I read the article that she's proposed, and I'm like, oh, this sounds kind of interesting. Let me read your article. I said, I'd like to read that myself. So I read it and I go, oh, forget this is a newsletter announcement. This is our class. It's a long article. I don't know how many of you realize my wife can be verbose at times, and it's a long article. So this has been a massive hack job to make this condensed down to a one class session. I think I've got the highlights in here. But yeah. So
The actual thing. We have a soft copy.
yes, if you would like the digital version of it, that is available to you at $9.95 after the class. You might even get a signed autographed copy or something. So here we go. So there's a number of categories of how these fit into the story of Mary. It's basically a timeline. So we start off with her ancestry, and you know, the idea here is you're going to hear some things that essentially justify that Mary is a saint. You know, that's how these stories are going. Oh, well, if God's perfect, he could only be born in a perfect human. So these are the tales we tell to justify that. So here we go. We'll take turns reading. I guess I'll start. Much of the goodness and purity attributed to Mary was also attributed to her immediate ancestry. It's not good enough that Mary's perfect, right? The Catholic Church traced her story by means of various religious texts back to her maternal grandmother, Asmaria. As a young virgin, Asmaria joined the Carmelite order. After a vision, however, colleagues realized that she was to be an ancestress of the Savior and encouraged her to leave the monastic life and marry. After 5 of her husbands were struck down by the jealous and threatened Satan.
5 of her husbands?
5 of them.
So how many did she have?
Well, 6. She married a man named Stelanus, with whom she conceived Anna. I mean, man, you don't want to get married to this girl anytime soon. Wow. Yes. So 5 of her husbands struck down. I wonder who added that to the legend, you know? Somebody who maybe it was Stelanus. Yeah, I always did 5 before me. I don't know. Let me move John. Move John over there. All right. Shall I take one?
Anna grew up and married Joachim, a rich man of the house of David. Despite the material fortune, Joachim and Anna were very sad as they were old and had no children. Joachim went to the wilderness where he fasted and prayed for 40 days and 40 nights. Meanwhile, Anna also prayed and promised that if she were to be blessed with a child, she would dedicate it to the service of God. She was very sad, but she put off her mourning garments, cleansed her head, put on her bridal garments, and went into the garden to walk there. She sat beneath a laurel tree and said, O God of our fathers, bless me in whom I pray, as that is, bless the womb of Sarah, and gave us to her son Isaac.
An angel then came to her and promised her a daughter. Meanwhile, an angel also came to Joachim and promised him a daughter, predicting her glory. The angel then summoned Anna to meet Joachim at the golden gate of the temple. This golden gate to the walled city was a symbolic reference to the Immaculate Conception of Mary, which she did, and they embraced. In the 9th month, Anna brought forth, and she asked the midwife, "What have I brought forth?" The midwife replied, "A female." Anna said, "My soul is magnified this day."
You know, it's got to be connection. They have to add it in because Mary had her soul magnified, right? So they've got to have a, you know, making history repeat itself. Oh, look at this.
So
Now-
where does this story come from? It's not in the Bible.
Oh, I don't have the reference in the book in this, but
So it's
do you remember?
other.
Not
Yeah.
specifically, but it's what are known as the Apocrypha, which are part of the Greek Bible or something. You know the Apocrypha, Cliff? That didn't make it into the Hebrew Bible, but they are parts of some other Bible.
Yeah.
And I don't have the author's name for the actual book titles.
But yeah, it's what wow, hang on a second. So in this picture here, so the pictures of artwork, it's on display at Glencairn, at least it was 25 years ago. And you know what you're picking out from this, it says the crown virgin sits on the throne of Solomon. It's a reference to her ancestry, the royal house of David, and the wisdom passed down through her from Solomon to Christ. So they're running this genealogy back to David on her side, but it's not just David. It's, she's got Solomon's wisdom. She's got this immaculate conception of her own. I mean, it just, they keep adding on to the legend because, well, she's got to be perfect, right? She's got to be perfect. The next one, another sculpture. You're seeing the mother of Mary, so the Jesus's grandma, and yeah, they're making it a whole family thing. So gives you some idea of how this expands and expands. Now this is 15th century, so it's 1500 years after the fact. So the legends have surely grown since the original time. So how is it that Mary doesn't have any sin, right? How is it she is so perfect? Because we're all stained with the sin of Adam and Eve. We're stained with that original sin. So therefore, if Mary's perfect, how does she not have this stain of original sin? Well, glad you asked. We have some stories to enlighten you.
Some believe that Mary was a miracle child similar to John the Baptist, born to elderly parents. There are many others who believe that Mary, like Jesus, was conceived of the Holy Spirit, which protected her from the stain of original sin. In the Catholic Church, the belief that Mary was conceived and born without original sin came to be called the Doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. So I don't know about y'all, but I always thought Immaculate Conception was referring to Jesus, but actually it's referring to Mary's conception.
Yeah. Doing?
Yes, the view that Mary was immaculate, free from original sin, either from birth or from the time she was very young, was supported by many. On one hand, Peter Lombard held that Mary as a human being was conceived in original sin, but as the mother of God was purified before she was born. Thomas Aquinas believed differently, saying that the sanctification of the Blessed Virgin had to have been after her animation, otherwise she would never have incurred any stain of original sin, and therefore would have no need of redemption and salvation that was through Christ.
Right. So, I mean, I think Mr. Aquinas there makes a reasonable point. You know, she can't be so perfect as to not require some sort of redemption. But still, she was sanctified. You know, she was still cleaned at some point. So, you know, it's like when you first tell a lie, man, you got to tell all these other lies to cover it up. And while this wasn't a lie, it's, you know, when you start at the wrong place, boy, all the tales you have to tell to reconcile this thing. It's just easier to admit Mary wasn't perfect. Cliff, you want to have a go?
Mary's preservation from original sin not only referred to her birth, but also to the effect that sin had on the rest of her life. Mary was thought to have been incapable of sin. This was not because she was prohibited from sinning against her will. In fact, her free will was not impaired.
Margaret, do you want to do one or?
On the contrary, she simply had no incentive to sin. Her resistance was perfected, and she never experienced any sinful desire. It is in this respect that comparison was often made between the Virgin Mary and Eve. Eve was seen as the first sinner. She succumbed to the serpent's temptation in the Garden of Eden. She was disobedient and thus became the cause of the fall of herself and the human race. Mary, on the other hand, triumphed where Eve failed. Mary, in her obedience, became the cause of salvation for herself and the human race.
Yeah. I mean, it flies in the face of what the new church teaches about, you know, you perfect your resistance to temptation through trials. You know, she had no incentive. She had no desire. She never experienced any sinful desire. So how could she have perfect resistance if she never experienced the trials, right? So, and that was part of what Jesus was doing here, you know, perfecting the resistance, making it actual.
You're comparing oranges to apple stuff. I mean, using logic where logic does not apply.
Right. It's just fun to poke holes throughout the thing. But it's, I just find it interesting. That's how far people were willing to go, you know, to say, you know, oh, no, I couldn't even capable of it. Her childhood was quite amazing too, as we're going to see. When Mary was 6 months old, her mother stood her on the ground to see if she could stand. Not only could Mary stand, but she walked twice 7 steps and came to her mother's bosom. Mary's twice walking 7 steps represented her 7 joys and 7 sorrows. Sometime after this, Mary was presented at the temple as her parents had promised. Accounts vary as to when exactly she was presented. Some believe that when she was 2 years old, Joachim suggested that they take her to the temple, but Anna replied, "Let us wait until her 3rd year. The child may then no more long after her father and mother." Yeah, because at 3 years old, they still don't care about their parents. Yeah, no, Mom and Dad, get out of here. Right. Oh my gosh.
Then when they took her to the temple at 3 or 4 years of age, Mary did not turn back to her parents. The priest placed her on the 3rd step of the altar, and Mary climbed the steps herself. The Lord God put grace upon the child, and she danced for joy with her feet. It was here that Mary made her vow of virginity. Following her presentation in the
That's right.
temple, Mary remained there to be educated with the other Jewish children. She was nurtured like a dove and enjoyed ecstatic visions and daily visits of holy angels.
The Greeks. Oh, it's so good. It's so good, you know. Yeah, Laura, you got it. You know, it's like 3 years old. She thinks about virgin. She didn't know what a virgin is.
She was exactly.
Well, what then again? It says that's where she made her vow of virginity, but it didn't say it was when she made her vow of virginity. So maybe.
No,
I don't know.
okay.
Maybe it was just while she was living there, 10 years later. or
You're
whatever.
too
I don't
good.
know.
You're too good.
I'm just saying. I don't know.
She didn't do push-ups. She pushed the earth down. So here we have a, what's this? Flemish 15th century stone presentation in the temple. So
So that's the angel of her at the, near the top.
go away. Yeah. All right. Next up is
According to another legend, Joseph was a widower previously married to another woman named Mary. Joseph and this first Mary had 3 sons, James, Samuel, and Judas. In the eyes of St. Jerome, the perpetual virginity of Mary could be maintained only by making Joseph a dedicated celibate. This implied that he would not have been married previously, and that he certainly did not have any sons from this alleged marriage. Mary had been reluctant to consider marrying, but as she had obeyed God's inspiration in making her vow, so she obeyed his inspiration in becoming the affianced bride of Joseph.
yeah. So yeah, it's okay. So first we have, all right, Mary's perfect. Well, we got to make her mother and we're gonna make them perfect too. And they come from the line of Solomon. Oh wait, well, Joseph. How do we cover this up with Joseph's? He's a celibate, man. But when Jesus refers to his siblings from Mary, oh well, he married somebody else named Mary first.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, that's got to be how it is, right? Whew. That's hard. That's hard. In all my years of fixing cars, the mechanic's rule was always that the simple solution is always the answer. You always start with the simple solution first. Don't go to the crazy solution. Serves you well. All right. So the conception. Well, how was Jesus conceived, right? Well, that's an easier one, you'd think.
Mary and Joseph both told the temple priests that they were pure. Priests did not believe them. They then tested their word by one of 2 manners. One legend stated that he gave them both the water of the conviction of the Lord to reveal the truth and sent them to the wilderness. Both returned whole without feeling upset. Others believed that rather than go into the wilderness, each went about the altar 7 times, and that no sign appeared. People marveled. They all asked Mary's pardon. The priest released them, saying that if the Lord found no sin in them, then others should be. Joseph took them.
Then, yeah.
We transcribed it.
The original look didn't have that.
No. You type 5,000 words by touch. Yeah, no, so it's annoying because I've read through this presentation several times and I've picked out bunches already. But yeah, so I mean, this one I find particularly interesting just because, well, the priest didn't believe them. Well, that makes sense to me. The priest did, yes, okay, yeah, sure you didn't, right? Yeah, you're a virgin, oh, right. So yeah, I do find that interesting. And of all the ones that we hear, this is the most believable. This is the most believable. Yeah, but come on, this girl's the virgin. You guys, oh come on, you know, they didn't believe any of that stuff, except
Joseph
for
was a virgin too.
Who was?
Joseph, who'd been married before.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He was a celibate.
Depends on which story you like.
All right. Here's about the Advent. Cliff, you're up, buddy, if you want one.
When it came time for them to be registered, Joseph and Mary went to Bethlehem. On their way, Mary felt later coming on and asked that they find a cave in which to have the baby. Joseph was thought to have left her with his sons, James and Samuel, but he went off to find a midwife. When he found the midwife, Salome, he explained to her that he and Mary were betrothed but not yet married, and that she had conceived of the Holy Spirit. As they approached, a dark cloud came over the cave. And the wife said, "My soul is magnified today. My eyes have seen wonderful things. For salvation is born in Israel."
You can do the first paragraph for both if you want, whatever.
Immediately the cloud disappeared and a great light appeared. By this time, Mary had already had the baby. Salome was astounded and proclaimed the miracle. She met another midwife, Salome, outside the cave, who was skeptical of the miraculous birth and wanted proof, saying, "As the Lord my God lives, unless I put forward my finger and test her condition, I will not believe that a virgin has brought forth." Salome examined Mary, and immediately she howled in pain, for her blasphemous hand had been withered. She cried, "Woe for my wickedness and my unbelief, for I have tempted the living God, and behold, my hand falls away from me, consumed by fire." She begged forgiveness and said that if her hand were restored, she would heal in Jesus' name. An angel told her to touch the baby, and when she did, she was made whole again.
Where do they get these stories from?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, and again, this is one of the more believable ones. It's like, a midwife being skeptical. Yep, that adds up for me.
Two midwives.
Yeah. I mean, but you have the birth happening really quickly. So yeah. I don't know, but it is interesting. It didn't make the Jewish Bible. Due to her legendary preservation from sin, Mary's virginity was not damaged during or after childbirth for any of the usual pains or problems associated with this process. As part of her preservation from original sin, she was exempt by special privilege from intercourse, labor, and other physical processes of ordinary childbearing. She was permitted on a natural biological function, nursing. Yes. In fact, the nursing of Christ by his mother was a supreme example of Mary's exemplary humility. So I do like that. I'd like to know where you got this line from, how much of it is paraphrased and not like where she was exempt from the special privilege of intercourse. She was exempt from that? Who wants to be exempt from that? Right. Exempt from that, labor, another, yeah. But yeah, she's so perfect. Didn't have any. Can you imagine that? I don't think the writings tell us that regenerate people have no pain in childbirth, though I guess they could try to take that from the Adam and Eve story, right? Because that's one of the curses of imperfection. And if Mary didn't have that imperfection, then yeah, no pain in childbirth. On to you, Mary.
Mary, nursing has significant symbolism. The milk was considered a healing balm and symbolized wisdom and mercy. In addition to the correspondence to her role as intercessor, she was portrayed elsewhere as healing dying monks with her milk. It also represented her intercession with God. She nourished Jesus to encourage his meditation with God, the Father, on behalf of humanity. In terms of the labor, some went as far as to say that the baby simply appeared on the floor while Mary was sitting at home with Joseph, and her womb was found as it was before she conceived, or even that there's a strong impression that Mary's pregnancy, which only lasted 2 months, was simply a sign to her.
It's like, if that's the case, why did the Lord even need to have a mother, right?
Right, yeah.
If he's just going to appear on the floor anyway, you know. I know. It's like, whew, that was just like the highest of the, it just appeared. All right. Love it.
According to Marian scholar Marina Warner, the penalty of the fall was thought to have included all the processes of parturition, from menstruation to lactation. It is the effort, not the phenomenon, that is the penalty and sign of original sin. Therefore,
Faction.
what?
Putrefaction.
Not death. Labor pains, not childbirth. Cramps and discomfort, not menstruation in itself, are the consequences of Adam's sin. That'll be right.
Mhm.
Consequently, some believe that Mary did undergo these natural phenomena, but did not suffer the corresponding pains.
Not everybody believes Jesus just popped out onto the floor.
But some people do.
Well, you know, what I wonder is, did anybody actually believe that, or was that just some scholar's attempt to make it? So some scholar believed it, but it's like years ago when we went that field trip to the Jewish synagogue, and the elder there is telling us how, they believe in the world being 6,000 years old or something like that. Many of the people in the talking to us on the side, I don't really believe. No, I don't really believe that part. That's too. Yeah. Childhood. I forget who are we up to. Okay.
Joseph, Mary, and the baby Jesus thus fled in Egypt. While en route, they came to a cave and wished to rest there. Mary dismounted and sat with Jesus in her lap. According to the legend, many dragons suddenly came out of the cave, and they all cried out in fear. Jesus got down from his mother's lap and stood before the dragons, which worshipped him. He bade them to hurt no one. Mary was alarmed for him, but Jesus said, "Fear not, neither conceive that I am a child, for I always was and am a perfect man. And it is necessary that all beasts of the forest should grow tame before me." In like manner, lions and leopards also adored him and accompanied them, showing them the way as they continued their journey to Egypt.
It's like,
As you do.
it's like the inspiration for Wizard of Oz, right?
Well, yeah, right.
Ralph.
On the third day, Mary saw a palm tree and wished to rest under it. When she was sitting there, she saw fruit on the tree and expressed to Joseph her desire to have some. Jesus, sitting on Mary's lap with a joyful countenance, beckoned the palm to give his mother some of its fruit. The tree bent as low as her feet, and she gathered what she would. He instructed it to rise again and gave them of the water concealed below its roots. Instantly a spring came forth, and all rejoiced and drank it.
Yeah. Well, this is a little more believable. That's possible. I could see that. But not only does Mary have a heroic life, she has a heroic death. Cliff?
According to one version, from the Apocryphal book of the Pseudo-Medieval, Mary was praying one day to be reunited with her son, and an angel appeared. He gave her a palm from God's paradise and said that she would be dead in 3 days to live. She wished to be with the 12 apostles, and so all were caught up and carried to her door. 3 days passed in devout conversation and prayers.
Mary's funeral was interrupted, however, by a group of Jewish adversaries who tried to burn her body. One, the chief priest, even threw himself on her coffin. but his hands and forearm were shriveled. He confessed Jesus Christ, eloquently praising him, and was healed. The funeral procession was completed, and after placing Mary in the new tomb in the valley of Jehoshaphat, the apostles sat at the entrance. The Lord came down with many angels and asked the apostles, what should Mary's future be?
As thou dost reign in glory after having conquered death, so let the body of thy mother be given life again and be brought with thee into celestial joy. Jesus ordered the archangel Michael to take her soul. The archangel Gabriel opened the sepulchre, and Mary emerged and embraced Jesus, who gave her into the care of angels, who then carried her into paradise. Mary asked her son that prayers men addressed in her name would always be granted. Jesus promised this. Every soul that shall pray in thy name shall not be confounded, but shall find mercy, consolation, and help in this life and the next. Christ received her soul and crowned her Queen of Heaven. Mary was thenceforth the mediator for all human beings on earth who hope for salvation within the protection of the church.
She was the co-redeemer. She was actively collaborating with Christ in the redemption of the world. It was believed that after she died, God assigned her the mission to keep in close and constant contact with the needs and desires of people and with the cause of human civilization of God. She was able to fulfill this assignment thanks to her measureless compassion. Because of her mercy, she was more approachable than the three members of the Trinity.
Because Jesus, he had a hard time being approachable. The sinners, the prostitutes, these people, they didn't like Jesus. They couldn't hang out. Oh, wait, no, that's not how the story went, is it? Right. No, Jesus wasn't concerned about us. Oh, wait, no, he came here. Right. We don't need Mary to fill that role. We don't need it. That's what they'd have you believe, right? It's interesting, like, that they assigned to the mission of keeping close and constant contact. It's like, well, that is kind of God's job. It's what he does. That whole thing of being infinite really enables that to happen, right? Yeah. Next.
And some of this must have been because the church wanted to have Mary as a saint.
Yeah.
So they invented all these stories.
Sure.
Mary was there to protect people from the wrath of God's hand. She asked no question, laid down no conditions. In many Eastern apocalypses, they even stated that she descended into the underworld to see the fate of the wicked, resuscitating sinners so they could confess and sustain the damned in life until they could repent. She was the major intercessor between humanity and God. Although they did not worship Mary as divine, it was only through her that contact with the divine could be established.
Worship her as divine.
Just about.
As was observed in the Virgin Mary, the Roman Catholic Marian doctrine, God is the supreme majesty to whom none may come except through the hierarchy, by ways of the Son, who has the keys of his heart, and by his incarnation stands a little nearer to sinners. One can be sure of finding access to the throne of grace. If Christ is still a little too close to the majestic, Mary has the natural power over him that the mother has over her son. Mary, who by her pure humanity is close to us. And if the mother is not enough, there are the saints. The series is complete. Then, anyway, the saints intercede with Mary, who asks the Son, to whom the Father cannot refuse anything.
Right.
Yeah.
You like the Catholics making sure they establish their hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
That's going on there. You got to go through the proper channels. Don't just go to the top. Which, despite what it says in the book of Revelation, right? John falls before one of the angels, and the angel says to him, "You don't worship me. I'm just like you." So they don't.
Mary was not that humble.
No. All right. Final thoughts here.
More importantly than this, natural aspect of Mary's virginity, spiritual implications. Mary was a virgin because her virginity was a sign of her faith, unadulterated by any doubt, and of her undivided gift of herself to God's will. However, the purpose of the virgin birth was not to glorify Mary. Rather, it was intended as a proclamation that Jesus Christ is Lord. This is an essential idea that seemed to get lost in all the discussion about Mary's virginity.
Cliff?
True Christian religion states that the Roman Catholics have made Mary the mother more holy than all others, and have exalted her as a goddess or queen over all their saints. When, however, the Lord glorified his human, he put off everything belonging to his mother and put on everything belonging to his father. Sweet Lord spoke with Mary in the other world, at which time she explained to him that she had been the mother of the Lord who was born of her, but that he, having become God, has put off everything human that he has derived from her, and that she therefore worshipped him as her God, and was unwilling that anyone should acknowledge him as her son, because in him all is divine.
Amen. That's right
The
there.
end.
And it's true.
So, yeah, well, there you have it. We whipped through that pretty quickly, but yeah, it's definitely a different way of seeing the world, huh?
To me, it was just so eye-opening because, we get this cursory explanation of Mary's role in the Bible that it just doesn't say a whole lot about her. It tells us about her, the Annunciation and her visit with Elizabeth, and not a whole lot else. And then to encounter all this other stuff, like, oh wow, like there's a lot more out there than I realized, and that some people believe this other stuff.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and it's like you see the same kind of thing with some of the Hollywood franchises, right? You have the Star Wars movies, but then people write books on their tales that they weave in there to because people are interested in the story, and so some of those tales get wilder than the originals, and that's what's happened here. Like they've gotten some pretty wild tales out there about what happens. So the problem with this kind of stuff, though, is that people will point to the Bible and say, "Oh, well, these tales are made up too." Look, why do you believe that Jesus, died and raised from the dead? That was just a legend like all the other stuff. So yeah, it definitely becomes a tricky thing to navigate in that way, where you have to say, "Wow, for us to say that Bible's inspired, divine, all that kind of stuff. Wow, we just is for us." But people who are not raised with that could have a very different take on it.
For me, I feel like it's sort of useful to have this information, to be aware of it, just so that when we encounter, not that I have, but when we encounter people who attribute a lot of importance to Mary, we can understand maybe where they're coming from, or what some of the ideas are about her out there.
Yeah, and like you say, of the Catholics that I've known well, none of them subscribe to this kind of stuff in reality.
And yeah, there's still, Hail Marys, that's the cornerstone of, no, I say that not actually knowing, but
Cornerstone of football.
of Catholic religion.
No, I guess it is true that I know people who do venerate saints. They will pray to saints, even if they don't believe some of these fantastical tales that she didn't even have pain in childbirth. They will still invoke her name and whatnot. I do know people who do that.
And there are some, Catholic schools around, Mary, Mother of the Sea, or something like that. Like there's some that are named after her.
Many.
Okay. Yeah.
It certainly helps having Swedenborg message first, doesn't it?
Yes, having
the stuff in that light.
having Swedenborg up front, yeah, makes sense. But it just, I mean, look, I can understand where confusion would be, right? I mean, that's what it starts out with, is like, well, how do we reconcile that God comes through a person, you know, and they have this basic understanding that the perfection of God and humanity can't coexist, right? They have that very clear in the scriptures. Moses can't even see God's face, right? You see God's face and you die. That's a very well documented teaching throughout the Old Testament. So God being born inside a person, holy cow, how good must she be?
Weather.
Yeah, you know, this is, you know, so you can kind of understand where this comes from. And yet at the same time, it's like, well, God's being born as a natural person. He's not showing up in his full divine essence. That was the whole point. Right. He wasn't showing up at full strength. So, you know, you got to work through these things. This is the same problem they ran into after the death and resurrection, where how do we reconcile? We've always been taught there's one God. First commandment, there are no other gods. But now we got three. Oh, there's just one. There's three. There's one. You know, how do we untangle this knot? So, yeah, Swedenborg does serve a big purpose in trying to straighten those things out for us and saying, no, this is why, and logically laying it out.
Right, precisely. I feel like that's the thing. I mean, I think it's a new church thing, right? That the subjugation of the hells, like why Jesus came. I mean, not obviously to save the human race, but how he accomplished it. Is that a
how he did it? Yes.
Right, and so it was critical for him to be born of a very natural mother in order so that he could inherit all these different evils, because otherwise he wouldn't have been able to have those temptations and encounter them one by one and overcome them. So like we're at the complete other end of the spectrum on Mary in terms of her goodness, you know, or saintliness, her sinlessness. And once you understand that, it's like, oh, okay, now I understand how this can be possible.
I thought it was interesting the way they called her the intercessor as well. Because Jesus is also the intercessor with the angry God. It's not this idea you've got to have an intercessor.
Yeah, well, and that's why they have the saints below her. They're the intercessors to her.
Yes. Crazy. Interesting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Well, that was different. Appreciated that very much. So hope you guys enjoyed that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So,
John nodding his head.
John, you in agreement with this?
Oh, I'd never heard any of this before, Todd. I've been left a bit stunned by it all. It's a great fantasy story. I don't know. I can't give it any more credit than that.
You're just wishing you thought of it first, right?
Yeah, and I think it's been built up in the church about it's just this idea of hierarchy and power.
Yeah, I'm trying to do my best to reinstate that, but nobody's giving me the keys of the kingdom to do it. So
keep working on it, mate.
I keep working on it every day. I'm trying to take over the world, but it doesn't quite work out.
Yeah, that's
Do
true.
they listen to you?
Nobody's listening to me.
That's true.
Not even
It was
my
a
wife
great
and son.
thing tonight.
Especially.
What's that? Just, that's all right. I'll keep trying. Don't worry. One day I'll get it. All right. Well, I guess that's it. Good night.
Thank you.
Night, John.
Really interesting,
John.
Todd. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.